closings, it seems to me, tie in with your opening statement. And you should be writing your closing first, sort of as you're putting the case together, as you're doing depositions, you should be saying, oh yeah, I want to make this in closing, and we have an all-office closing argument idea file, so that anybody, if they have an idea for closing any of our cases, can drop that into the file, so when you get ready to do it, it's all in there. And some of the best ideas, by the way, come from our staff, not from the lawyers often, and so we make that accessible to everybody. But I want to give you a feel for how they tie together by doing a brief opening in a case, and then show you what we did differently in closing arguments. Start of the opening, start of the closing, okay? The time when a patient is most vulnerable of all is when you go into that little room and they make you take off all your clothes, and they give you that little robe thing that you can never, sometimes it's paper, sometimes it's fabric, but you can never figure out if it ties in the front or it ties in the back. And either way you tie it, half of you is exposed to the world, but you finally get it on, however you get it on, and you climb up on that crinkly paper, you know the sound of that paper when you sit on it, that's over the examination table, and you're sitting there, you're waiting for the doctor to come in and tell you the answer to whatever you're there for. Perhaps it's because you've been having heart pains and you think you might be having a heart attack or need a bypass. Perhaps you've been having serious headaches and you're wondering if you're having a stroke. Perhaps it's breast cancer that you're worried about. But whatever it is, in that moment, you are the most vulnerable that you ever are in your life, when some expert's going to come in and tell you what's wrong with you and what they need to do. And because of that vulnerability, the doctor should not have any hidden agendas. And you should be able to trust your doctor to tell you what's best for you without you being worried about whether he's getting kickbacks from the drug company or kickbacks from the product manufacturing company. And the government, recognizing that's your most vulnerable moment, has passed laws that say that is why product manufacturers, medical device manufacturers, cannot pay doctors for the devices that they might implant in you. It's a law called the Stark Act and the Anti-Kickback Act, and it is against the law to do that. In this case, Biotronic, who actually is from Portland, manufactures pacemakers and defibrillators, was not only paying the doctor, but was in a conspiracy with the hospital to implant as many pacemakers and defibrillators as possible. And in the end, this was a case for only one client, but in the end we had 33 people who got pacemakers and defibrillators they did not need at all. Okay? Want to hear more about that case now? Yeah. Okay, we'll talk a little bit about it. That was opening. That's the first part of opening. And I want you to notice that we start with the general and move immediately to the specific, so I connect with you, because all of us have had that universal experience of sitting in the doctor's office where you feel completely powerless. We've all been there, right? I mean, you say, oh yeah, that's me, and some doctor's gonna come in and screw me and tell me I need a pacemaker. And this guy, you'd come in with a knee problem and he'd say, you need a pacemaker or you're gonna die. We gotta implant it in the next 24 hours. Nobody's ever told me I have a heart problem. So you're there. Okay, so here is closing argument. Same case, after 3 weeks of trial. When I went to high school in a little place called Alamogordo, New Mexico. Tiny, tiny town. And we didn't have a lot of great literature in Alamogordo, New Mexico. So the first time I ever got to read great literature was when I got to college, first year freshman class, and the teacher had us read Dante's Inferno. And I thought how boring, and the language is going to be terrible, but it was just fascinating. It is, of course, the story written by Dante Alighieri, the Italian poet, about his trip through hell, and the angel Virgil is taking him on a tour through hell, and he writes about what hell is like and the different levels. Some of you are nodding who've read this too. Different levels of hell. The most fun part that he got to do is he got to put people he didn't like in various levels of hell that were still living at the time he wrote the book, which kind of a fantasy thing. When you guys write a book, same thing. You'll see in my book, there's some people I didn't like very much. Anyway. And the punishments in hell, of course, are from the least severe sins to the worst sins. And as he goes down in these circles of hell, the punishments get worse and worse and worse. And he describes in very descriptive phrases these horrible things, the horrible ways people are being punished for eternity. Some are burning in fire. Some, the people who stole the substance of other people, are sort of have only half a body, one body here, and then two heads of serpents, and they sort of gnaw on each other through all eternity. I mean, it's really worse than any horror movie you can see today, you know, written way back then. And the one question that I had as we read through the book, and I tried to look up the words I didn't understand, was who would be in the lowest level of hell? Murderers? No. Bad politicians? Maybe. And as we read, that was my big question. And when you got down to the lowest level of hell, in Dante's imagination, it is not fire, but it is ice, is the lowest level of hell. It's a giant lake of ice, and stuck in the middle of it is Satan, who was a fallen angel, whose sin was the sin of betrayal. And that's the sin. People who betrayed other people in the lowest level of hell. And Satan, who betrayed God as an angel, there with his big wings flapping, and keeping everything frozen. And all the people who had betrayed the trust of other people, they're frozen in contorted positions in the ice. And that took me aback as a young person. Like, really, not the murderers? And in truth, when you think about it, it's worse. I mean, there were some murderers who betrayed the trust of other people. Some guy who took two little princes to keep them and then murdered them. But isn't it so much worse that you say, trust me, and then you stab somebody in the back? And that's exactly what this company did. Okay? So that's how you tie it together and bring it back from opening statement to closing argument.